All right, so today we're going to create a simple chatbot app. So let's go ahead and name it chatbot. And let's try to imagine what it's going to look like. So what I'm going to do with this app is give it a couple of components. I want to be able to both speak to it because that's natural, but I also want to be able to type just in case the speech recognition doesn't go quite as well as we might like. At this point, we've all got a lot of experience in that regard. So I'm first going to go ahead and put a text input here. And I'll name it text entry. And then let's put a button there. And so I want the button down here. And this is going to be the enter button. So I can type something, hit the button, and then it gets entered. Alternatively, though, I might want to just speak to it. So I'm going to add a speak button up here. And then we need a place for it to reply. So to that end, I'm going to add a text field that contains the reply. And so it'll both display the reply and pronounce the reply out loud. So I'm going to need both a text-to-speech and a speech recognizer so that we can go in both directions. So here's my text-to-speech, and then here is my speech recognizer. Okay, my buttons obviously need better names, so talk to me. Call that one, and then that'll be the enter button there. Okay, so we are ready to go to the blocks. And so now that we're in the blocks, we can start working on programming this. So let's go ahead and start with the speak button. So when the speak button is clicked, we want it to say something, we want to be able to say something. So we're going to call listen, and then when the listen is done, the first thing we'll do is we're going to make our text entry contain the text that was spoken. And I know that from our experience, we know it's good to see what exactly was said. And then at that point, we want to handle our reply. Now notice we're going to handle the reply from both the speak button and the enter button. So I don't want to code that twice. So I'm going to make up a function. And I'm going to call this function respond. And so the respond function is going to take care of giving the user our artificially intelligent reply. And then similarly, if somebody hits the enter button, okay, come here, then we're also going to tell it to respond. And so we can handle everything the same way in this respond function over here. So once we've got some text, we need to break that text into individual words. And what our strategy is going to be is to see if we can identify the presence of a particular word. And if it is present, then we're going to have a canned response that corresponds to that word. So I want to take my text that's been entered and I want to turn it into a list of words. So to do that, I'm going to go here. I want to grab the make a list from text box. Of course, I have to store this list somewhere. And so to that end, I'm going to create a variable that I am going to use for this purpose. And I am going to initialize the variable words to be an empty list initially. Now we'll be correcting this easily enough. Specifically, we want the list of words to be the result of making a list from text. And where's the text come from? Well, notice it's going to come from our text entry no matter what. In the speech recognizer, we just put it there straight away. or it's what the user typed in before hitting the enter button. So text entry, get text. And then it says with a delimiter. So a delimiter is just some bit of text that separates the words. So by default, it uses a comma. I just want to use a space character, so I type the space bar. And now that is my delimiter, as it's called. Well, looking over the list here, I have something called text input 1. I really want that to have a better name, like reply. And that is what I am going to call it, text reply. Okay, so now let's think a little bit more about the response. So I'm going to use an if block to determine how we respond. And this if block is going to have this catch all else. So I'm basing this off of the original ELIZA program, which you might remember was supposed to be a Rogerian psychotherapist. So if it doesn't recognize anything that the user says, we're just going to ask the user to tell me more. So I have to do two things, right? I first have to put the text in my text reply, and then I also want my text to speech to translate it. I'm going to be doing this a lot. So again, I'm going to write a function to make this a little easier to do. And so we're going to call this function talk. And this function is going to accept an input, and I'm going to name that input the reply. So it's going to give the user a reply. And we'll see how to supply the reply in just a moment. So to give the user the reply, the first thing we want to do is set the text for text reply to be whatever that reply is. And we can grab that from our variables here. Here is reply just waiting for us. And now we want to use text to speech. We want to make it speak. And we're going to go ahead and give it our reply again. There we go. So it's both going to display it and say it out loud, and that gives our user multiple options. So if the user is comfortable with speech, they can listen to it. If the user wants to be able to see it and read it, well, they can do that too. We are doing everything we can for our user. So coming back to respond, if it doesn't recognize any pattern, we're going to call this talk function, and we're going to give it the following witty reply. The classic psychotherapist, tell me more. Now, there are going to be times where we actually recognize something, and so we're going to look at a first example of that. Specifically, we're going to ask a question as to whether our list contains a particular word, and the list is this list of words that we set up there. So I'm going to grab the words variable here, and this thing can go away. And we're going to ask if it contains the word feel. So see, if the user says that they feel something, the psychotherapist app can reply with a question. And that question is something the therapist uses to continue the conversation. And that question will be, why do you feel this way? Just like that. And so we have working now something of a psychotherapist. Oh, one thing we should do is we should make our reply have some leadoff text. And so why don't we have the leadoff text be, how are you today? And so the user can see that right there on the interface. Actually, you know what? Let's do this a little differently. Let's go over here, and we'll control this when the screen opens. So see, when the screen opens, we will call our talk function, and we will give that talk function, how are you today? And so when it opens up, it'll both say it out loud and display it for our user. So I'm going to start up the app. And it is time to try. It's not talking to me. Let me try that again.
How are you today?
See, there we go. So it opened up and it talked. So now I'm going to click the Talk to Me button. I feel fine.
Why do you feel this way?
I had a good lunch today.
Tell me more.
And so it continues, and so this conversation can continue indefinitely. Of course, it's not going to be terribly interesting because it only has 2 replies. And so to make it more interesting, we have to add more clauses. So I'm going to put an else if in there.
How are you today? Tell me more.
Oops, it is still listening to me. So I am going to exit the app.
How are you today? Tell me more.
Okay, I think I'm actually done with it for now. And so we can ask the list if it contains something else. So we could think about something typically Freudian or whatever. And so we're going to ask if it contains the word mother. And then if it does, we can have it ask a question like, how do you feel about your relationship with your mother? Oops. There we go. And so that's another classic psychotherapy kind of thing to ask. So let me start the app again.
How are you today? How are you today?
I feel fine.
Why do you feel this way?
I talked to my mother today.
How do you feel about your relationship with your mother?
It's fine.
Tell me more. How are you today?
Oops.
Tell me more.
And so there we go. We now have a working chatbot. Now, this specific one isn't necessarily going to be very engrossing. It really just doesn't have a whole lot going on. But what we've been reading about in Alone Together is the degree to which systems like this can ultimately be really persuasive to people. And so to this end, what you're going to be working on as part of your Unit 3 paper is developing your own chatbot with a personality that you design. And it'll be following essentially this outline. And you're going to experiment with it and see how absorbing is it. To what degree do people think that there's something there intelligence-wise? So you're going to be doing a little bit of artificial intelligence experimentation along the lines of what we've been reading about in the book. So happy chatting, and I hope you enjoy